Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Hummingbird Arcana Podcast. I am Jo Hummingbird. I am an evolutionary astrologer and an Usui Reiki master, here to deep dive into the worlds of astrology, Reiki, mysticism, and so much more with you. And today I wanted to come on and talk about something that I promised that I would make an episode about if you listened to the Astrology Basics episode, or if you listened to the Asteroid Astrology episode, then you definitely know that I was going to make this episode, and I just think I got a little out of order with all the pre-recording I've been doing recently, but I digress. Here it is. We're here now. We're talking about it. We're in the present moment, and we're fucking back, baby. But I want to talk about the transit positions of planets, and not necessarily the transits themselves, like what's going on in the sky currently, but what the planets are doing themselves in the natal chart. And this is something that I touched on in my Astrology Basics Masterclass towards the end of it. And if you are interested in learning the basics of astrology without breaking the bank, with no faulty AI scams, no data being sold, no tracking of anything, then absolutely go ahead and click the link down below in the description box. I'll also have it in the show notes for if you're listening on a podcast streaming platform. But this masterclass that I curated for all my little peeps here, they absolutely love the masterclass. Everybody that's taken it, I'm not bragging. That's just like, I'm super giddy and excited. I'm grateful that people have responded that way. It just makes my heart so full and reminds me that the work I'm doing is actually meaningful, and it isn't just me talking out my ass about things that I studied for over 8 years. But this masterclass really does give you an elementary breakdown of every basic part of astrology that helps you understand not only how to read your natal chart, but how to speak the language of the stars with ease. And so that will be linked down below if you are interested in that. It is only $33 to access the recorded video replay from the fall 2025 cohort for life, as well as the June of 2024 cohort. And exciting little thing that I have going on for that, I am doing fall and springtime cohorts for Astrology Basics rotationally moving forward. They're going to be live as was the one in the fall and the summer of 2024, but I'm going to continue these on so that way if you don't feel like solely purchasing the masterclass that exists as it is right now, you will continue to get access to the evolutions of them over time and the live coaching calls with the questions answered and everybody that was there. And so that was a very, very fun experience that are going to continue to get more fun, and I'm just so grateful that I can offer that to you guys. So if you want lifetime access to the Astrology Basics Masterclass, it's the recorded video replay like I mentioned. It's in a little file. You're not going to get your information sold. You're not going to get scammed. It's only $33 for the whole 3 hours of the masterclass, so I think it's pretty affordable. It makes things a little bit more accessible for people in the astrology community in comparison to, no shade to other astrologers, charge your worth, do what you think, but I really don't think that we need to be charging thousands of dollars for courses. I really don't. Even hundreds. Like, I understand hundreds a little bit more. Maybe you've been like myself and you've put almost a decade of work into something like this, but in the same breath, take a look at the current state of inflation in the economy. I think it's a little bit more fair to be like, hey, here's an easier way into the door so this doesn't feel like you're having to sacrifice some part of your survival in order to gain access to the information. Yay! I just don't believe in that. And so, like, I do have high ticket offerings on my website, like my Reiki courses, but that's because that's following a tradition and a specific course set that I have been handed and that has been passed through lineages. But this, my personal offerings, what I've curated with my wisdom and my knowledge and my understanding of the cosmos, that is going to be as easily accessible to you as I can ever fucking make it. That's why my readings start at $11. They're not anywhere out there to break the bank. It's less than the price of a fast food dinner at this point. So, just throwing that out there for you guys as an option in case you want to dive a little bit deeper into this world. But if you don't, you can tune back into the Astrology Basics episode and follow along in real time. You also have the option of downloading my free Astro Cheat Sheet PDF. There's no information exchange for that. You're not doing an email sign up. You're not giving me your phone number. You're not doing anything. All you have to do is go to my website, take a look at it. It's there for free. There's also a little option for you to click to the external link to if you want to view it and download it into your phone, so you don't have to access my website every single time or, go to the Google Drive for it. You don't have to do that either. So that is out there for you guys. I just wanted to give you all your options and point out all the different ways that you can go about this. But I digress. Let's get back into today's topic, which is the transits and their positions from a planetary standpoint, not in the sense of where they are in the sky, like I mentioned, but the transit itself. What is the planet doing? What position is it in? And these are going to be direct, they're going to be retrograde, and they're going to be shadow or station, depending on what word your astrologer uses. I use them both interchangeably, just depending on where we're at, but station in and of itself can also be shadow, but shadow is not necessarily a station. I hope that makes sense. Like, it's kind of like a squares and rectangle situation going on there. I'll get into more of the details here in a moment as we dive deeper, but before I do that, make sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the channel and turn that post notification bell on so you're notified every time a new episode comes out, so you're not missing out on any astrological updates or information that can be useful for you. But if you're watching or listening, I should say, on a podcast streaming platform, then go ahead and leave a 5-star review if you're enjoying being on this journey with me and getting all this astrological information for free. It really helps me out, gets me pushed out there into the algorithm, and it reminds me that what I'm doing actually has some meaning and not just me talking out my ass about something I'm passionate about. But I digress. So let's go into retrograde, the most common word you're going to hear thrown around the astrological community in the pop astrology world, on social media, zodiac memes, all that kind of shit. Retrograde is not a movement of the planet out in space, for real. From an astrophysics standpoint, retrograde does not exist. Only from an astrological standpoint does retrograde exist. Now, that doesn't mean that retrogrades and transits like this, like shadow, direct, whatever, they're invalid. That does not mean that. That means that retrograde from our position on Earth is only observable in astrology, not in astrophysics. Not that it doesn't have a phenomena in which can occur. It's a matter of we only give it credibility and have an influence over our charts or governance or anything when it comes to astrology. It doesn't mean anything from an astrophysics standpoint from our ability to thrive and survive on Earth. But I digress. When it comes to retrograde is quite literally, if we look at it from the astrophysics standpoint, planets don't move in perfect circular orbits. They do little spirals in little ovals over the, predetermined path of their orbit around the sun. And so something that we have used as a tool to discover planets in the past, when, 400 to 450 years ago with the invention of the telescope and being able to introduce Placidus as a system into astrology instead of Holstein, that's also where we get that from. But in that time period where we introduced telescopes to be able to look beyond what we can see with the naked eye, we started observing things of our planets moving in funny ways in the solar system. Not that we couldn't see the ones with our naked eye doing that, but we started also seeing other objects do this. It's a funny movement of the gravitational weight of one planet being affected by the gravitational weight of another, and the forces that interact back and forth like that. And basically what they do is, like I mentioned, they'll pull on each other, and that will affect the shape of their orbit. So that's what creates the little spirals on the path. If you can imagine a circle, and you can imagine, instead of it being a perfect circle, maybe squish it a little bit and make it a little long, skinny oval, maybe stretch it out and expand it, make it like a little elliptical oval, but maybe not perfectly centered with the other ones. It's kind of how our planets work. They don't all cross over each other's orbits, but they're definitely not in perfect circles. None of them are. The closest one that we have to a perfect circle is Mercury, and even that little baby does not stay in a perfect circle, I'll tell you that. So I digress on. These little circles and ovals and all these different shapes that we have going on in the planetary orbits, in and of themselves, it's like you're drawing a little coil around the circles. Instead of it just being a line, there's going to be a line in the middle with a bunch of circles surrounding it. And those circles, those periods, are going to be what actually define our retrograde the most, is because when we have planets pull on each other, and from our orbitary standpoint, in our own little spiraling sequence that we have on other planets pulling on our gravitational field, Jupiter, Saturn, things like that, the big gas giants that are super dense and have an effect on damn near everything in the solar system. But those effects that pull planets in another direction or make their orbit a little bit of a different shape in this part versus that other part, the gravitational force in which they carry in comparison to another planet, and in the transit around the sun, in the orbit around the sun itself, from a timing standpoint, if those gravitational forces are pulling on each other at the right time and they're affecting each other's orbits at the right position, then that creates, from our standpoint on Earth, I will slow down my speaking so this can be fully understood here. When those planets and their gravitational fields have an effect on each other, so much so that they affect the way that they move, how fast they perceivably move, and their little spiral orbits around that circle that we talked about in the beginning, that is what creates retrograde, is because from our standpoint on Earth, from those effects that we have on each other planetarily from a gravitational standpoint, they create the optical illusion of a planet either sitting still or moving in the opposite direction of its orbit from our night sky, from our earthly perspective. Now, again, astrophysics, that is not something that happens, or otherwise we would all be fucking toast by now. We would not be held together in our gravitational orbit. We would not be still a solar system after billions and trillions and quadrillions of years. So that's where we get a little bit like space geeky about it, and that's what I love about astrology, is that because it predated astronomy as a science, it is the fundamental like field in which we play upon for astronomy and astrophysics to have been birthed from. And so that just always blows my mind, in that like no matter what was going on, astrology was always paying attention to it and giving it some sort of meaning, even if it from a scientific standpoint could be argued a different way. It still, has an effect on us, because gravity is still a force that we don't see but we believe in because of its effect. Just like we believe the air exists but we don't see it with our eyes, we see what it affects. So it's kind of like having faith in a system, not in a system that's outside of you. It's a system that is literally mapping everything that is within you from the inside out and the outside in, mutually reciprocally. So I digress. That's kind of what retrograde means from a science standpoint, but it ties into the meaning of it from an astrological standpoint. Whenever that gravity of another planet and its influence affects that planet in its orbit, that creates a retrograde, that creates the visible optical illusion of the planet moving backwards in its orbit in our night sky, that is retrograde. And so all the time you'll hear Mercury's going retrograde, Mercury's currently retrograde, funnily enough, as I'm recording this. But Mercury's going retrograde, Venus is going retrograde, Jupiter's going retrograde, Saturn's going retrograde, Neptune's going retrograde, Uranus is going retrograde. There's a lot of retrogrades that have been happening in the last 3 years. I'm gonna be real. The generational planets, the outer planets, the non-personal planets, they have been going and going and going. And I'm just praying that they go direct soon, but it's not gonna happen for a while, at least not past, July, August of 2026. I digress, excuse me. But retrograde is that time period whenever it is perceivably moving backwards in its orbit. And as such, we get to interpret the energy of that differently, because it's moving back through the different degrees, possibly through different decans, possibly through different signs, depending on the position in which it went retrograde or the degree in which it went retrograde. That's why the whole decans thing is super important. If you didn't listen to the I Have a Bad Chart episode, I break down the decans and what they mean in there as well. And I also have a post on my Threads account. If you want to understand why the decans are arguably one of the most important parts of the chart, I will have that link down below as well. You can follow me on Threads. It's a really great place to keep up with my thoughts and my astrological perspectives. But I digress. Retrograde, again, is just that backwards moving across the sky, but it's not actually happening out in the solar system. But a planet of some kind is affecting our gravitational field, and then our gravitational field is affecting that planet in some way in order for it to have that exchange of the optical illusion to move backwards in the sky. Now, let's talk about direct, because that is what you'll also hear next a lot of the time. It's like, okay, well, Mercury went direct, or Saturn goes direct, or Uranus is going direct. That just means the planet is moving back in its normal, perceivable direction of orbit. It is not staying still. It's not moving backwards from our perception in the night sky or in the sky period. It's just moving right along as it normally should. Direct sounds a little more scary than it is, but it also, if you can pick up on context clues, it's pretty much the only thing that would describe it being normal. It's pretty direct. It's like when somebody's talking to you directly, they're saying what they mean. They're not putting any fluff or distraction around it. It's just direct. And so same thing when it comes to planetary travel and transit. when a planet is direct, there is no like fluff to go back and have to analyze or observe retrograde. There's no confusion because there's a standstill shadow station. That's exactly what the planet should be doing, is going direct and acting in its exact force in the way that it's meant to. So direct is pretty simple, and we don't have to dive too deep into that because the planets most of the time are going to be direct. Retrogrades, depending on the planetary cycle, they only happen an X amount of times in a year. Mercury retrograde happens on average 3 times a year. Venus retrograde average between 1 to 1.5 times, and then so on and so forth throughout all of the different planets in the solar system. So let's dive into this whole shadow station thing, because this is where some people tend to get tripped up because of the squares and rectangle situation. So I hope that my words aren't too confusing here. We do have Mercury retrograde, so forgive me. This is a time where talking is not going to be the most easeful thing, but I'm a Gemini moon conjunct Saturn. I have Mercury conjunct my Capricorn rising. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. There's mutual reciprocity between my subconscious mind and my ability to communicate what I'm feeling and thinking. So I'm pretty good at navigating Mercury retrogrades. They just have to have me kind of focus a little bit more and pay attention to what I'm saying. But I was born with Mercury direct, so I'm not like those people that have Mercury retrograde in their chart and they stumble over their words all the time. I think it's pretty funny when I find somebody with Mercury retrograde in their chart. They tend to have struggles when it comes to communicating themselves without either getting flustered or tripping over their words or saying the wrong thing. It's really funny. But not to shit on anybody who has Mercury retrograde in their chart. I love you. But I digress. Back into shadow and station. So shadow and station periods, they can be defined the same, but again, it's a squares and rectangle situation. Every station period is not necessarily shadow and vice versa. So shadow is what happens when a planet is stationing to go retrograde. So station is more so the verb, and shadow is kind of the noun, but station can also be the noun or an adjective. It really just depends. But the station itself, like station and stationing, those are verbs and adverbs for describing the actions of the planet, not describing the planet itself or describing, what the planet is or its characteristics, but rather what it's doing. And so when a planet is stationed, it can be in its shadow period to do so, which the shadow period is that still point. And from the same conversation we were having about retrograde, when a planet in its orbit is being affected by the gravitational forces of other heavenly bodies, that it starts to perceivably stand still, but then it has to move perceivably backwards, because it's never just going to stay still forever unless it's like one of those hella slow-moving generational planets out there. But regardless, planets can be shadow station and not move for an extended period of time, depending on what their retrograde looks like. But you'll find that with the inner planets, the personal planets like Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, they're not going to stay shadow or station forever. They're going to be there for however long they're going to be there. Maybe Mercury, it's like a day or 2 or 3, maybe even a week at most, depending on where we are in the orbit and what position we're at, what's gravitationally pulling on it, etc. All the talking points from the retrograde chat. But Mercury is going to be the one that moves the quickest out of that, and it's going to go retrograde for the shortest period of time. Venus a little bit slower because it's obviously further away from the sun and has a different field of gravity. Same for Mars, same for Jupiter, same for all the planets. And so when it comes to the station, it's like you hear people say, okay, well, Mercury is stationing direct. So that's where the adverb part of station comes in. It can be, stationing direct from retrograde. It can be stationing retrograde from direct. It can be station retrograde from shadow. And shadow, again, is just the position, the adjective part of this, not the verb, not the actionary, but the description of itself, of what does the planet mean when it's in shadow? What does this actually do to have an effect on us? So most recent example that you can probably pull upon is the shadow period from Mercury and Jupiter recently. This is like November 13th or 12th that I'm recording this on, something like that. And just within the last couple days, both Mercury and Jupiter moved out of shadow and stationed retrograde. So This means that they were in shadow station, but then they stationed retrograde from their shadow position. And shadow basically is the still point, kind of the void space between taking action or going backwards on the path. And this is where the whole gravitational field conversation comes back in of, okay, instead of right now, from our standpoint on Earth, things moving backwards or things moving forward, we are in perceivable standstill with that planet. Or from an astrophysics standpoint, we're moving at the same speed in this point in orbit as that planet, whether that's for like Mercury's case for like a few days or maybe a week, or Venus and Mars's case where it's like a couple of weeks, or Jupiter's case where it's like damn near a month before it goes and does anything. Because if you paid attention, for the latter half of October and leading up into the beginning of November of this year, 2025, when I'm recording this, Jupiter was in shadow and it was stationed that way. It wasn't necessarily moving from an astrological standpoint, but it was definitely from an astrophysics standpoint, still continuing on its orbit. But from the shape of the orbits and their paths as different planets, and again, the gravitational fields and their effect on other planets and other orbits and other transits, we were perceivably either in a standstill or moving the same speed as Jupiter, which is what creates the optical illusion of the planet being still in the sky, which is what creates the optical illusion later on of planets moving retrograde or backwards in their orbit. So I hope this is making sense so far. Let me know if I need to slow this down, if I need to repackage this, let me know. Sometimes, when Mercury goes retrograde with all my Geminian mercurial energy, I can get very carried away to my topping points. But at the same time, I also feel like Mercury retrograde helps me to be a little bit more articulate about what I'm trying to get across, because my brain is actually able to keep up with my mouth and the blah, 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 blah of it all. You know what I mean? So I digress. So now that you know all these different descriptions about the planetary transits in their position, not necessarily what they do in the sky and where they're going and what sign they're in, but what is their station? What are they on? What are they doing? How do we apply this to the chart? So this is when we talk about things like Mercury going retrograde or Jupiter going retrograde. A common example of what's going on in the sky right now in the transits, the actual places in the sky, this is where we see Mercury having just gone retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius. And this is where sign rulerships and house rulerships and planetary ruler, like all the things come into play here. And again, this is where I emphasize the astrology basics, because if you don't know the basics of astrology, you won't understand what this conversation is. So this is definitely not for my beginner astrologers. This is not for my beginner babes that I love and cherish so much for stepping into this new world. But this is for people who are a little intermediate or by bare minimum advanced at some level. Whether it's your understanding or your curiosity is advanced and you're willing to retain the information, whatever. Doesn't matter. As long as you understand, that's the point. But if you don't, and you want to be able to, again, the Astrology Basics Masterclass is down below for you. The Astrology Basics podcast episode for free is down below, available for you. Or if you don't want to listen all that way through and then come back, you can follow along in real time with me. Again, the Astro Basics cheat sheet is going to be down below in the description, as well as the show notes, so you can take a look at the categorizations, the rulers of the house, the ruler of the planet, the ruler of the sign, the categorizations of the signs and the houses, all of that good jazz. So that way this doesn't confuse you and get you lost in the sauce about understanding this. So Mercury is, as we know, by rulership in detriment in Sagittarius. So this is the sign of his opposition, because Sag opposes Gemini. Gemini rules Mercury. Sag does not rule Mercury. Sag is this is not Mercury's home. This is not Geminian home. This is not Virgoan home. So this is very, very, existential for Mercury to be, because Mercury is the mind, it's logic, it's intellect. So of course, whenever we have a sign in, something that rules something more mental and a place of more spiritual place, it kind of dissolves it. Especially if, this is being Jupiter's sign. Jupiter rules both Sag and Pisces, and these are the two of the most spiritual signs in the zodiac, because they are the most, from like a spiritual standpoint, they are the most beyond this planet. They are the most beyond this life. Not that Pisces isn't, because they are definitely more so than Sag. Sag being the centaur, the half horse, half man, and Pisces being the fish in the ocean of the cosmos. Sag is going to be the one that can run free around every plane of existence and traverse them with ease. But Pisces is going to be the one who's existing within all of them at once and not really knowing it, but also knowing it at the same time without having to try. So when it comes to Mercury, the opposition of both of these signs, because Pisces opposes Virgo, ruled by Mercury, and then Sagittarius opposes Gemini, ruled by Mercury as well, and both Pisces and Sag are ruled by Jupiter, this creates like an existential crisis for the mind, which is hilarious. Take a look at the collective right now. And I definitely don't mean hilarious from like a moral standpoint. I mean hilarious from like an irony standpoint. Like, how cosmically ironic is it that right now, in the state of the current environment, both politically and from a world standpoint of what's happening cross-politically across the world, then of course Mercury would be detriment retrograde right now in Sag. It wouldn't be a retrograde in the sign of Libra. It wouldn't be a retrograde in Virgo or Gemini. Of course it would be in Sagittarius right now, out of everything that is going on. So take a look at like flight stuff with the FAA. Take a look at people's ability to communicate and hold civil conversation. It's more so based about beliefs and ideologies and philosophies than it is about facts on paper, which Mercury rules the facts on paper. Sagittarius rules personal beliefs, my experience versus yours. So, this is not a happy place. And then for Mars to be in Sag, conjunct that retrograde for a few days at a time, that's the planet of conflict and war and, peacekeeping. People are trying to assert their beliefs in the sign of Sag with the empowered energy to be able to do so. Double fire from Mars Aries standpoint and Jupiter Sag energy standpoint. So this is like fighting fire with fire, but using your words and your intellect and your intelligence to be able to weaponize that, and not necessarily, manipulating people. It's not 100% saying, okay, we're going to manipulate you. It's like, okay, we're flat out just going to tell you that this is what's fucking going on and you're not going to like it, and I don't care. Like, that's Mercury retrograde conjunct direct Mars in Sag. And of course, it opposing Uranus at the 29th anadirect degree of Taurus, which, Sag and Taurus are not opposing, but by 3-degree orb proximity with this retrograde in conjunction to Mars, there is an opposition that happens within a 3-degree orb of that 29th anadirect degree of Scorpio, being within, 1 degree, 2 degrees of that sign and of that point, that then opposes that 29-degree Uranus. So this is not fun. Uranus retrograde is like, okay, let's utilize AI to like rip apart things. Let's have AI take away jobs. Let's have people get replaced by AI, not just in the workplace, but in other contexts from like, Taurus is the sign that it's in right now, but it was just in Gemini. So like, let's replace our friends with AI. Let's, rely on AI to make a grocery list for us because I can't keep my mind together, but then put it back in Taurus where it has been for years. And then you get, okay, well, let's destroy the land and call it the future. Let's take away, food and people's right to health care, taking care of their physical bodies, Venus, Taurus, the senses. Of course, that's what's going on right now. And it opposing Mars, the planet of war and conflict, Mercury retrograde and detriment in Sag, my beliefs versus the facts on paper. Take a look at what's going on. The astrology, you can't make it up. You can't make it up. And people who want to argue astrophysics is the only thing that really exists and astrology is a bunch of woohoo mumbo jumbo. Take a look at what they actually understand and process this as the science that is the foundation for your very field before you take your privilege and your entitlement and try to tout it with that Mercury-Mars bullshit. No, thank you. Prime example of that, too. It doesn't even have to be political. It can be people in the spiritual space denying the fact of its existence because they're only relying on the facts and technology to prove everything to them, when that's just not the case. Humans created technology. That artificial intelligence isn't 100% artificial. It's man-made. It's just tuning in with things that man has programmed into it to be able to outsmart man. That, it's not at all 100% real. It's a lie. And so that's also part of why I'm so passionate in my work about being not AI, no faulty AI scams, not AI in this post, AI not generating my planetary descriptions on my Instagram and my TikTok and my Facebook and my threads and my Lemonade, like all of that. I don't use AI for fucking anything. And if you do, I would invite you to reconsider your choices, because they are destroying the land with the mega computers that, take away water from rural and minority communities. So, it's not just like, oh, cute little pictures of the Simpsons eating a donut from my local donut shop with AI. It's, oh, there are plots of land that even, in current deals, Native Americans and indigenous peoples are being erased from their land yet again hundreds of years later, just for this to be considered a societal advancement, which is the whole point of why we were taught that was bad in the first place, is so we don't let shit like this happen again. So here we are with the transits, with all of those examples of what's going on in the real world. Astrology is real. I'm a real astrologer. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat shit just because it's hard to hear. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. Click off. But if you do and you understand, oh, this is some real credible science shit that's happening. It's not just like some woohoo mumbo jumbo that somebody wants to sell me for some spiritual pseudoscience and putting some money in their pocket, because that's not what this is about. This is about you having the knowledge and the tools to be able to empower yourself to make decisions based off of the ancient systems that were put into place by our benevolent ancestors, knowing that the malevolent ones were coming. And here we are, living in the world that is a result of those malevolent ancestors, and we still have these tools to our disposal. If we do, certain people have more privileges than others, myself being included in that to an extent. But if we have the ability to have access to this knowledge, then we have the ability to do something about it. And so that's why I make all of this content free. I make all of this accessible to you. That's why my astrology readings are so low in cost. That's why I generate this content myself, so you can show, or that I can show you, that it's not just, some next level spiritual guru put into the capitalist disguise. It is, oh, this is real empowerment. This is real knowledge. This is real integrated wisdom from 8+ years of reading charts and 11+ years of reading energy, and doing that for people, not even for charge all the time, but only in the last 5 years have I started professionally charging people for this service of being able to read energy or read cards or read astrology charts or what have you, or do Reiki. It is something that I want to help you integrate into your life and integrate a basic understanding of, so that way it's not, left to the wind whenever you need it the most. So getting back into the topics before we got off on that tangent here, very Mercury conjunct Mars opposing Uranus in this time, but that's an example of what's going on in real time to help you understand these transits. Mars is direct, but Mercury and Uranus are retrograde, and they came out of the shadow period of being still for a while, and then they moved. And again, they will station shadow one more time and then go direct eventually. Mercury to be the one that does it sooner than Uranus, of course. But, let's take a look at another sample in the sky right now very briefly. Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, so it's very happy. But with, the sign that is in, Jupiter is in Cancer, that's ruled by the moon, and the moon is constantly changing, of course. Every 1.5 days it's going to move through a sign, and so it is very, very, like emotions and like the moon rules over, very subject to change. But Jupiter in Cancer, what does Jupiter rule over? Sag and Pisces. What's happening in Sag right now? The Mercury-Mars conjunction. So, this is mutually reciprocal across the board. Just because Jupiter's happy and exalted in Cancer doesn't mean that what's going on over in a Jupiterian essence isn't going to get amplified by that exaltation. And so, right now, our ability to nurture ourselves is very expanded from an intellectual standpoint and from a philosophical standpoint, but it's also just as equally under attack from a mental standpoint and from an intellectual standpoint. A lot of people are purposefully kept restricted out of certain pieces of information as to keep them dumbed down, which is also, again, digressing back into my point, why I do this and why I'm so passionate about it is to help other people empower themselves with the information that we do have, so that way we're not left in the dark all the time. Even if you don't know what's going on outside your front door, maybe you understand what's going on in the cosmos right now. Maybe if you listen to my Zodiacal Releasing and Transits episode, I'll link that down below as well, If you listen to that episode, then you know how to utilize the transits not just by themselves, but in accordance with your own planetary cycles to be able to make the best decision for yourself, even if you don't know what's going on outside your front door that's affecting you directly. So I hope that all of this can boil down for you just to remind you that there is, a level of empowerment that we do get to have, regardless of what narrative is happening outside of us collectively. There is something that we can do about it. There is a way that we can understand even what's going on. So even if we can't do anything about it in this moment, we know what we're up against. So that's retrograde, that's transit, that's, direct shadow station. That's all of it boiled down into the basic understanding of what they are, as well as some real life examples as to what's going on right now to help you understand and put those into a practical place in your mind. So thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you resonated with any part of this, or it spoke to you, or it made you more curious about astrology, let me know by liking the video and subscribing to the channel, turning on that post notification bell so you're notified every time a new episode comes out if you're watching on YouTube. But if you're not on YouTube and you're listening on a podcast streaming platform, again, if you could just leave a 5-star review or just let me know what you think about it in the review section, that would be really helpful in getting me to have some feedback and some motivation and some, reflection about my work from you guys. I really appreciate anything that you can offer. But I also am just super grateful, Now here we go, Mercury retrograde, tripping over the words. But I'm super grateful that I get the opportunity to help assist you in awakening to your cosmic divinity in this lifetime. It is my purpose. It is my mission. It is why I am put on this planet in the first place, in this lifetime specifically. So thank you for giving me a bit of your time today to listen to this rant, as well as description of the retrogrades, the direct position, and the shadow station transits. But I am super grateful for being on this journey with you and for you taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Hummingbird Arcana. I'm Jo Hummingbird. Thank you for letting me assist you in awakening to your cosmic divinity, and I will see you in the next one. Many blessings and take care.